Okay. So now, hopefully people can hear me. Hopefully now it's good. Let's also do this. I'm just waiting for confirmation that you can all hear me. Everything sounds good. Okay, people can hear me. They have video, they have audio. Okay, all right. Okay, well, sorry it took so long. We have been having kind of a hectic morning. Anytime services go down, one of our key things that we want to do with everybody is make sure services go up as soon as possible. So right now for Windows 8.1 users, we are working, we are throwing everyone at this issue to try and get Windows 8.1 back up for everyone out there. But for everyone who's watching the stream or for everyone who's watching the YouTube video, let's show you how to create save states, or how to make it so someone can save your game, come back, and pick up where they left off. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to bring in a logic cube, and I'm going to create a menu. So we're going to cover kind of two things at once. We're going to look at save system, but also menu system. So this is going to be my menu logic cube. I like to name them all as well. So we're just going to name this one menu. And I'm going to be using keyboard mouse for this tutorial. So first thing I want to do with the menu system, you have to create something that actually activates the menu. So to do that, we are going to say that when the enter key is pressed, we are going to toggle a Boolean that we are going to call menu. So anytime you press enter, it toggles this Boolean menu, meaning it turns this on and off. So enter kind of activates or exits your menu. You can obviously kind of set this up however you want, whatever inputs you need to. For this tutorial, I'm just simply kind of doing some toggling. So I want to actually display out a menu. Very first thing I want to do is I want to have it so my world pace is equal to 0. So when I'm in my menu, everything in the world pauses. It's a really important thing. Always make sure you have, or else when you activate a menu system, everything in the world still goes on. Games have that sometimes, but I prefer to have the menu just stopping. And good to see that some people are up on Windows. All right, the next thing I want to do is I want to display a background. So just have kind of a dark, opaque overlay over the background. So we're going to look for the square. We're going to bring this in. I'm doing this so, I'm creating a starter kit. So I know we have some amazing new 2D icons thanks to Title Update 7, but that needs to be, that's part of the 2D icons gameplay pack. So I'm going to just use our icons that are part of our starter pack. However, what I'm going to be doing, you're going to need Massive World Builder in order to create save states in your game. So that's something to keep in mind. So we're going to set a width of, let's say, 50. And we're going to do a height of, let's say, 30, just super big. We are going to set the color of this into a new color. Just make it pitch black. We are going to set its on-screen position. We're just going to call this 0. So the 0 vector is the 0 position of everything. So that means the center of your screen, because we're dealing with X and Y vectors here. So it's creating this at 0 point, and then you want to set opacity at, let's go with 0.75. Oh, and it should be noted, if you're looking for me being connected, I'm on our internal servers. I had to switch in order to be connected so that we could show different things here. It's important with save states, you need to have a connection. So we're creating a menu system. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create buttons for save and exit without saving. So I'm going to copy this line, and we're going to instead display this square with a width of, let's say 8, and a height of, let's just say 2. Maybe we'll bring the width down to like 7. And we're going to have these buttons be orange. We're not going to have any sort of opacity. So there's something else I kind of want to show you guys, a different way to create on-screen vectors. So there's a lot of different ways that you can have on-screen vectors. You can either pin variables and set their x and y variables that way. You could manually say that the x and the y of a certain vector is equal to a certain amount, or you could do something else that I'm going to show you. So let's set once. Underneath this once, we're going to set 2 different vector variables. We're going to set x, and that is going to be equal to world relative east. And then we are going to set y, and that is going to be equal to another world relative position, world up. And those are absolutes on the y vector and absolutes on the x vector. So just like that, I have kind of set what x and y are equal to. And now what I can do is, let's grab this y. So I want my first button to be a tiny bit higher in the screen. So I want to put this at screen position 0. Then we're going to do plus. We're going to bring in my y vector variable, and we're going to say that's multiplied by 0.2. So what this is doing is it's saying that your starting point is basically the 0 vector, which is 0x, 0y, and then you are adding on to that world up, which is just up in the y area, multiplied by 0.2. So that translates to an on-screen position of 0x and 0.2y. So this is just a nice, simple, easy way. If you want to have less lines that you're setting vectors on, then you can do it this way like me. And then we're going to set a second button, and we're just going to have that as minus y multiplied by 2, so it'd be negative 0.2 on the y vector variable. All right, and let's just show you what that looks like in game. So let's bring this up. Let's hit enter, and we see kind of things darken. Now, other on-screen things like text won't darken, so that's just something to keep in mind. But you'll notice we have a pretty nice dark screen. You'll also notice that the back screen is in front of these 2 orange buttons, so we just want to actually bring this higher. And now things are bright and orange. So when you're working with a lot of on-screen things, then you want to just make sure that things run sequentially. So the very first thing will actually appear at the very bottom. So then I just want to have within here, I'm just going to copy line 8, and we are instead going to display Press A to save. And we don't need widths. We don't need color. And then we are also going to bring in another line here. And we're just going to call this press B to exit without saving. So that's nice and simple. All right, so we hit enter, and whoopsies, I forgot to change the variables. So let's just set this to minus instead of plus. Let's test this again. There we go. So press A to save, press B to exit without saving. Kind of very archaic, very simple. You can play around more with Booleans, so you can have kind of one of these might be highlighted when you're selecting it, and one of them isn't. I just want to do a nice, quick, dirty menu system because I want to get to save states, which you're all much more interested in. So we're just going to set the font size of both of these to be a large font. And then we're just going to leave it at that. So once the menu is activated, then we're going to have certain things happen that when you press A, then that's when you're saving. So the most important thing about saving in a game is, and again, this is where we get into Master World Builder. You need to have the Master World Builder pack in order to do this. You want to go to World Properties, go over to the second page, go to Campaign, and choose the tile Go to World. Then open up another tile, go to World Properties again, and choose World Picker. This will bring up all of your levels as well as community levels. And so I want to choose my Tactical RPG Starter Kit. When you're saving, what you want to do actually is you want to reload your world. During a reload with Master World Builder, it saves progress based on things known as campaign tiles. So what we're doing here is we're actually, in order to save it, we are going back to the same exact world. That's how you start to create a save state. Because once you've hit this, it's saving kind of all the progress that you had in your previous iteration of this world and going back to this world again. In this state, though, we don't have anything yet set to carry over any sort of variables or anything about our characters. That's kind of the most important thing. And it doesn't need to be set as once either because it's just happening when A is pressed, which lasts for just one frame. So the campaign tiles are super important here. And we're going to need to do a few things, though, before we get save states working. So I went through because I knew it would take a really long time and kind of did a lot of the coding already. So let's start breaking things down. Now, there's a lot of code here. Again, this code was all covered previously during, we had 3 different YouTube videos which cover this. We have a video about how to make an RPG Part 1, how to make an RPG Part 2, and then how to make a respawn system. So now we go to save states. And I'm just bringing these lines back to what they originally were. So before, if I could just copy this, there we go. Wasn't hitting Control V. So before, these are the lines we had to create our characters. A global Boolean is something that happens or global state is something that is happening throughout the entire world. So the entire world, in these lines, the entire world knows that the respawn point is this one stone pad. It knows that player 1 is this fighter. It knows that player 2 is this archer, player 3 is this mage, player 4 is this tank. Everywhere in the world knows that these things are set as these object variables because they're global variables. But with Massive World Builder, you have access to a new type of variable. Let's go over to the campaign tile again. So world properties, campaign, and choose campaign. So campaign it's global plus. So a global variable only continues in that world. A campaign variable continues with you as you go from one world to the next. So anything that's set as a campaign variable will continue onwards. Project Spark will remember it as it's loading up a new world. So that's the really, really important thing to keep in mind. And that's actually, basically that's the crux of sort of save states. And also, you can use this tutorial to create a multi-world game and use the exact same things I'm doing here to bring characters and bring all their stats over to different worlds. You're just going to need to, instead of linking back to the same world, you're going to need to link to the next world. And then you're going to need to set up things, basically any brain that doesn't have a campaign tile in it, it means that the things in that brain won't be remembered, or any object that isn't assigned a campaign tile, it means that those things will not be remembered as campaign tiles. So now what we have here is this is all happening kind of very first frame. It's under once. And these 4 tiles right here, these 4 lines right here specifically, are creating my initial 4 characters. These are your 4 playable characters that are being created. And it's really important that they are going to be saved and then they can be transferred over to my different worlds. And this is kind of step 1. The problem with just keeping things like this is when I come back to this world, so when you come back to a world, it's going to run through all the code in your world again. The only thing that's kind of different when you're reloading a world after kind of going through that save state is it looks for what is being set as with campaign tiles. In its current state, these 4 lines right here, no matter what, the first time you go in a world or after you go through a save state and reload a world, they're going to keep on creating these 4 characters, these 4 brand new characters, and saving them with these campaign as these campaign variables, because this is creating every single time you enter. So 2 very important things to know when dealing with moving from one world to the next in save states. Once means once per world. So once will run if you reload that world. It means once per world loaded. And also, brain ordering is not remembered from one world to the next. So for instance, if you have a brain running in a character, then you use push brain. In a current world, if you say pop brain, then it'll remove their current brain and bring back their original brain. With this though, if you have used push brain, you go to the next world and say pop brain, it doesn't remember what the past brain was. That brain was left back at the last world. So in order to have certain things run kind of intentionally only once total, you need to start setting things on the win side with campaign variables. So here's what I want to do here. So on the win side, I can now say win campaign P1. And this is saying basically when there is something in the world that is set as your campaign variable of player 1. Then now it's going to check, is something already set as campaign player 1? If so, it's going to do this. If nothing is set as campaign player 1, then we're going to have this as an else. So if nothing is set as campaign player 1, it's going to create a new guy and call campaign player 1. So just like that, we've now constrained it to create this brand new person only when you don't have something already set as this campaign player 1. So when you do bring things and characters over from one world to the next, though, you do need to create them. They are going to be brought in as unspawned objects, basically. So something created with a campaign variable, it'll transfer to the next world, but nothing will happen until you spawn it into that next world. So you still do actually have to create this person, but you want to create them while remembering what they were doing. So instead, what you want to do here is we want to create campaign P1. And so what it's doing is it's just creating this guy, but this guy with all of his kind of variables saved, the things that he's been doing across your world before you saved it. And we want to spawn him at a specific point. So I'm going to say I'm spawning him at position. We're going to use another campaign position here. And we're going to use a campaign vector variable. We're going to use campaign P1. So as you could imagine, what I'm going to do in just a bit is I'm going to actually hook this up so it remembers the place that the person was in when I saved it, so that they're created back at their original place. And yeah, if you're curious about how I set up my respawn system, there is, like I said, there's a YouTube video on that. There's a lot of different YouTube videos on kind of how I got to this point. More complex than your typical respawn system, but I made it in a way. I mean, everything I'm making here, I'm kind of making, going the extra step of complexity to make sure that it works in no matter what setting you're working in. So for instance, save states are pretty easy if you're just working with one character. If you're working with 4 characters that all have levels and other variables, then I want to make sure that you know what you're doing. So that's why I'm kind of, I am going kind of the most complex route so that you know how to do everything easier from there. Once you get what I'm doing, then anything below that, anything easier, is a piece of cake. That's kind of my my look at things. So I want to just basically do the same exact line here for all 4 of my players. I want to create them. Oops, not create champion. So this will be create campaign P2, and we're going to say at position campaign, bring this vector variable P2. And also for this, if there's not a campaign P2, then it's going to create this new person. And we're going to do the same thing here. And do not fear, everyone who is watching the live stream version of this. This will be on YouTube. So you'll have all the time in the world to go through the layers that I'm going through here, understand sort of how I did this. Because save states can definitely be hard to grasp at first, but once you understand that basically it's just kind of a new type of variable, then it's easier to understand. So the best thing to do if you're really kind of confused about save states, understand the difference between a regular variable and a global variable. A regular variable only works within that object. A global variable works within all objects. So kind of the campaign variable is a step above that. Global variable works in that world. Campaign variable works across all worlds. So it's kind of the next step up. As you mess around with campaign variables, you start to understand that these are kind of the bread and butter of save states. So I am just finishing off this thought here. And you could do like old school Nintendo password type things, but that seems kind of hard. Save states is actually, like what I'm doing here, I think is actually easier than you setting password codes for your game. All right, so those 4 lines have now been transferred to 8. Let's quickly review it. Again, we have set that we are creating this new character. We're setting them as campaign player 1, player 2, player 3, or player 4. Then we're checking if they already exist in the world. Then it's just recreating them instead of assigning them to this new created object. And you want to continue the same thing with the very important thing is every logic cube that is dealing with variables and values you want to happen across your world. For instance, you have a logic cube that deals with all your leveling and XP. You need to do the same thing for that. So let's go to the very top here and let's see what I did. So I had a logic cube that just showed off the health bars of my characters. I needed that logic cube to be consistent and all the variables in it to stay consistent across my worlds. So I kind of copied the exact same thing where I just created that logic cube. I set it as a campaign object variable called health bars. And then I only create it the first time. If it's already exists in the world, then I go back and recreate that object variable instead of creating a new logic cube and setting it as that object variable. What happens if a character dies? Will he revive when you get back in this world? Or will he stay dead? That's an interesting question with how I've set this up. So if one of your characters dies, then what you would want to do, probably to keep things as good as possible, you want to get rid of destroy after death on all your characters. That's probably you probably want to make it so that none of them can be destroyed after death. So you want to go in your characters and kind of set within them, go to properties, combat, health and defense, and destroy after death, turn that off. And so it's actually much easier when you don't destroy objects after their death. It just makes it so much easier because their brains are still running in the world, they just can't do anything. Yeah, and so if that character is destroyed, basically, that character's kind of lost everything. That's why, especially when you're working with leveling and such, you probably don't want to you definitely want to turn off destroy after death because that destroys that object and all the information that was inside that object. So just make it so they aren't destroyed after death and they kind of continue throughout worlds. Going back into this logic cube. So again, I have 4 logic cubes that I've created in here that I needed to also bring into the world. I had this health bars logic cube that sets the health bars of all of my players. I had an XP and leveling logic cube that sets, obviously the XP of my characters and what happens after they level up. I have a character switcher. I needed this to also be a campaign object because then it could remember what character I'm currently on. And then the last one I needed to keep as the campaign object is my push brain, which that one remembers who my current player is, who's the current person is that I'm holding. So I found basically I needed to save my 4 characters and I needed to save 4 logic cubes. You should go through in your world, look at how many players you need to transfer between worlds, how many logic cubes full of code you need to transfer between worlds, set them all as campaign object variables, and then kind of put in this code where basically they're created if nothing's been assigned to them. And if something has been assigned to them, then it just kind of, this create tile, create campaign P2, this is kind of a respawn in a way. Think of it as a respawn. And so all I really did after that is I had a lot of global variables beforehand, and anything that you have respawning, you just want to go through and make every single one of those variables, change it from a global or a local to a campaign variable. Campaign variable is kind of the next step up. So what I next did is I went into my XP and leveling brain. Let's look at how the brain looked beforehand before I get into this code here. So, oops. So here, I originally had just this simple line of code, campaigns global. So this is kind of an important thing to talk about. This line 2 used to be, I was setting my global XP to be equal to 0. So initially, I just wanted my global XP to start at nothing. The problem is, when you go through a save state, once runs once per map load. So every time, that means every time you reload the map, your XP will drop back down to 0. In order to save that, you want to actually constrain it. So you want to bring campaign variables onto the win side. So what I simply did is I checked for every single variable initially before you set any sort of amount to it. Like before you give a number variable any sort of number, they all start at 0. So actually, I didn't really even need to set this because XP would have default started at 0. But every single number variable starts at 0. So I just basically constrained these things from only running once in the entire campaign. So I looked for basically when these were less than 1 or 0, then these actually ran. So initially, you would assume that all your number variables are going to need to be set as whatever. So for instance, here I needed XP to be set at 0. I needed the XP I need to get to the next level to be set at 100. And then my player levels needed to be starting at 1. So with these constraints, this means that when I reload the level, say I have 10 XP when I reload the level. Well, it's going to check. So it's going to say, is campaign XP less than 1? Nope, it's 10. So I'm not going to set campaign XP back down to 0. Is the amount of XP I need to get to the next level, is that at 0? Nope, it's been set at 100. Okay, I don't need to run it again. Or are the levels of my characters set below level 1? Nope, they're set at level 3. Okay, I don't need to run this. So it's very important to set those constraints so you make sure that things are set as once, actually run once in the entire campaign rather than once when the world loads. That's another thing to kind of keep in mind. So a lot of this was, again, kind of just going through, and every single variable, I switched from global variables to campaign variables. Within my health bars, I went in and set all of my variables in here from global to campaign. There's some things, though, that don't need to be set as campaign variables. And it's kind of important to look and to know, okay, it doesn't matter if this is reset every time. So like, for instance, the vector variable icon 1, or basically the position of my warrior's face. This, it's fine if it resets. Like when I reload the level, it's okay that it's back to have like an X variable of, say, like 0.5 and a Y variable of 0.7. Because your UI is going to stay in the same place, unless you have moving UI, and then that's when you bring in a campaign variable. So also when you're kind of looking at what to save, constrain it, and don't just give a campaign variable to every single thing, or else it starts to get pretty confusing. And thanks, Mescad, for answering an interesting question. If two different levels use the same variable name, then the variable that you bring in, it's going to use that version of it. That's a good thing for Mescad. Actually, speaking of, I urge everyone as well, the user Mescad, youtube.com/Mescad. He's just started putting out some multiplayer tutorials himself. So this is kind of right in line with multiplayer and level linking, world linking kind of have a lot of similarities. So I also kind of figured out that my global tactical view, this is the point when I switch from regular RPG mode to tactical mode. I don't need that to that doesn't need to be a campaign variable because it doesn't progress. It's a variable that doesn't change over time. It just changes with my button pressing. But my party member, I wanted to remember if I had party member number 3 or player 3 selected and I saved, I wanted to remember that when I go back and save, then it brings them in. So with all that done, let's go in and test this. So I have my characters, and now let's go ahead and switch to my archer. So I'm going to have her kill off a bunch of these goblins. We're going to go up to level 2. So I've increased levels. So take note of the note of the XP bar at the bottom, the yellow XP bar. Take note of the position of that, just so you can make sure that all the variables didn't indeed change. So we're going to bring up my menu now, and we're going to press A to save. So this reloads back that same level. And whoa, what is happening? And now you'll also notice that, let's just make sure. I probably shouldn't have tried to show you 2 errors at the same time. Anyways, there are a few different problems with how I set things, and there are certain things you have to scrub and set before you actually transfer worlds. So the first of those is, let's go back to our menu, and let's see what happens when I press A. So currently when A is pressed, I just go to world, that same world. But if you remember, we have to hook up something. So you want to save all your character positions. So I was saying for each of my characters that it would create them at this campaign position called P1, P2, P3, P4. So now let's go in here and let's actually say we are going to say that the vector variable P1 is equal to the object variable P1's position. So we're going to do that for all 4 of our characters. So vector variable P2 is equal to my player 2 position. Vector variable P3 is equal to my player 3 position. And vector variable P4 is equal to my player 4 position. All right, so now we have the positions properly set. So when I press A, it's saving all the positions of my characters, and therefore they're going to be spawned back at their same positions. So let's go back in and test. Let's go over to my archer. Let's kill some goblins. Let's grow some levels. Alrighty. So now let's open up my menu. And let's go ahead and save. Okay, and now you will notice that all my characters are back at their same positions. And you'll also notice that my XP bar stayed at the same. So that means my characters are currently all level 2, actually, with some XP increased. So that's all good. What happens when I change my character, though? So this is an issue that comes into play when you're using when you're bringing over multiple characters. This is what I was talking about with kind of brain ordering. Doesn't transfer from one world to the next. So now, basically, no matter who I select, my archer continues to have her brain. So she continues to be controlled by you. And the reason for that is, let's go into my push brains logic cube. And let's look specifically at this line 4. When my party members change, whoever my campaign player is, it's going to pop their brain. And within here, I just changed all my global variables to campaign variables. So campaign player kind of, whoever that set as, transitions from one world to the next, or that same world reloaded. So pop brain, though, with my archer, I went into the world again. She had a brain that I controlled. When this line ran, pop brain, she doesn't know anymore what her last brain was. Her kind of understanding of what her last brain was in the last world was left behind. So that means you kind of have to you have to kind of scrub brains. So if you're going to be using push and pop brain, you have to scrub brains before you go from one world to the next. And that would simply just be my campaign player is going to pop their brain. That's all it is. Because this is basically, it's running what line 4 would run in the previous world, or what line 4 is running here. So it's running that so that before I transfer worlds, then my archer is having her brain popped. So she's having her brain where I control her removed. So it's bringing back her NPC brain, the non-controllable character, so NCC brain, I guess. But that brain of kind of the character that's not controlled by you is being remembered in her. Then you're transferring worlds. Then you get back here, back to this world reloaded. It says, so my archer is player 3, and currently I have party member 3 selected. So immediately when this world loads, it then pushes onto my archer, or I think it's actually 2. Yeah, player 2. So pushes onto my archer my brain where I control them again. And so that just keeps in line, it basically keeps in line their ordering of brains, so I can use push brains and pop brains again. Templates. Good question. The question was asked about, what about templates? How can you bring those across worlds? I'm actually doing that. Again, I went kind of the most complex you can go. It'd be much easier if I wasn't working with templates, because then I just set in my object, hey, you're a campaign variable, continue onwards. But when you're working with templates, you have to create that template in the world, and when you create it, do something like what you have on line 14 here. You create it, and that same line, you assign a campaign variable to it. That means that it has now been given a campaign variable, and then you have to recreate that template when you reload it using that campaign variable. So basically, lines 13 and 14 here, or 11 and 12 here, or 15 and 16 here, those take care of, if you have a template, creating it, assigning a variable to it, and then when you go back to the world, you have to create it again. So yes, you'll have to create a character if they're a template. Actually, if your character is not a template, you don't have to create them, because the character's already been created in the world. So if you, for instance though, if you have a character that has been, that's not a template in World 1, you transfer them over to World 2, and there's nothing there, you will have to create them because there's no character there. So I hope that answered your question. So the other really important thing with XP and leveling is just make sure everything else that reference your past variables, global variables, change to campaign variables. So for instance, in my setup, I have in each of my enemies, let's go into their brain, the only way they interact with my players is at the very end when they die, they give my characters XP. So this was global, I needed to change it to campaign, or else this wouldn't run. So honestly, creating save states is pretty easy. It's just you have to link back onto that world or go to the next world. It's just really important to understand what objects need to be brought from one world to the next. Save all those objects as campaign variables so that you can bring them into the next world. That's the most important part. Understanding and just looking through all your objects and all of your variables to understand you're a variable that needs to be consistent throughout every world I go to. I don't care about. It's fine if you stay in this world or if you reset when I respawn the world. But let's look at what it would actually look like when you go back to the save state. So let's bring up my archer again. So let's kill some of these goblins. Let's go up to level 2. Now the one thing I didn't set is the goblins. They aren't set on any campaign variables. So these goblins, every time I reload my world, they are going to respawn again. Now you could totally set it so those goblins don't respawn. You have to set them all on campaign variables as well. That's the thing to keep in mind. If you want a save state to be perfectly exactly everything's the same, you have to go through everything that runs once on that world's reload so it doesn't run again. That's an important thing. Can you have multiple save states? Interesting question. Let's first just go through this save state and reload this save. Multiple save states. I think there's a way of faking it, but currently I'm about to show you kind of what save states look like. So let's go back, kill these goblins, and then now let's reload. So let's exit out of here. Then let's go back, let's hit play, and this is what you're gonna get when this is kind of what loading a last save looks like. So you're gonna get the option of continuing or starting a new game. Starting a new game will wipe everything from the save state. Continuing will start it from where you last left off, the world you last left off in, or the version of that world you last left off in. So you can't directly do multiple save states within a world. What you could do, you could kind of do some fakery where you have, say you have kind of 3 worlds that all link to each other, and you could have certain things happen in one of those worlds, like maybe it initially when you save, it saves to one of those worlds. The second time you save, it saves to another one of the worlds. Third time you save, it saves to the third time in the world. The only problem is you have to then go and search that like second or third world. So it's we don't have a current system where it's easy to do multiple saves, but at least we have a pretty easy system to get you into doing save states and being able to save your games relatively easily. I mean, I went through some pretty complex saving with 4 characters in 45 minutes. Of course, I did some pre-programming before, but all that pre-programming was just copying and pasting the campaign tile onto things. And if you start a new game but don't save, let's test that now. Let's go. And oh, perfect. All right. So this is a problem with working with internal. Sometimes you get crashes. So we're relaunching it. So this should be a great indicator because now we can look at. Now I've exited out of Project Spark. So what happens at this point? Okay, so I can go back in, play, and you'll see, even though I've restarted Project Spark entirely, I still can pick up where I left off. So let's go and hit new game. Now let's exit out of here. Let's hit play again. You'll see that you haven't saved it, so you can still go back to your previous save. So the answer is yes. You can. You can technically have kind of two states working at once, right? You can have your initial state, where basically the state you have before saving, and you can have a state after you've saved as well. So I think that should about do it. This is going to be uploaded on YouTube within the next 24 hours. Everyone on YouTube, I hope you do check out, if you got super lost during this, I hope you do check out all of our other tutorials on, we have a tutorial on RPG Part 1, RPG Part 2, how to create a respawn system. All those are sort of what have led to this world. This world is also going to be updated and shared within the next 24 hours once we get back online on Windows 8.1. So without any further questions, I'll keep it at that. Tune into our Thursday live stream. We might be given some nice hints and surprises at what's next in Project Spark. Otherwise, thanks everyone for being awesome. We had an amazing time at GDC last week, showing off amazing community contributions. People were blown away. Developers, indie developers, professional developers were all playing these games and saying, no way, people made this in Project Spark. So it was really rewarding seeing kind of the hard work of you, the community, really paying off, and developers taking notice, and really getting excited about what's being done in Project Spark. So we had a super time. The community, you guys are amazing, and we'll keep on helping to show you guys cool extra things you can do, like save states in Project Spark. So thanks everyone.
Create your game as you play? Any Spark can do it. Spark, activate the portals.